I'm Madeline.
And I'm April.
And we're here to present the POWW podcast.
Powerful Women in Work. We'll be going through my mentorship program and covering some key goals that we'll be discussing.
Things like communication, powerful presence at work, and career planning. I'll be sharing some tips and tricks I've gained along the way.
And I will be showing how I'm implementing these into our mentorship program.
Fantastic. Let's get started. Welcome to episode 1 of the POWW podcast, where we talk about communication.
In this episode, we'll be covering body language, sitting yourself at the table, and tone of voice.
Let's get started. Hi April, great to see you again. So we're here to chat about communication, one of the first goals in our mentoring program that we're doing together. So what is it about communication that kind of stuck out for you as one of the things that you wanted to focus on in this program?
I think communication is such an important tool to be able to have in any type of situation, especially professionally, because you're able to express yourself and be heard. So people know what you're saying, they're not confused by what you're what you might be meaning. It's just, I would like to focus on being able to communicate myself effectively so people don't have to follow me up for things or ask for clarification. And it's not like it happens particularly all the time, but I think it's something that is invaluable to work on for pretty much your whole life. Like, always being able to communicate properly in the workplace is something that I'm looking at. And I think particularly for me as well, in my role and maybe even in my career future, there will be times where I will have to present in front of people, and I think that particularly I don't have much experience in that, and this is something that I'm super excited to focus on and be able to hear more from you, because I know that you're able to carry yourself very well in meetings, and you always have particular points that you like to speak about, and I think the way that you convey yourself is extremely confident and an effective way of communicating to people.
Oh, thank you. That's good to hear. All right. So, like you said, communication is really important. And I think from the point of view of this mentoring program, I think part of it is you having the confidence to communicate clearly. And when someone's looking at you, they're thinking young professional on the rise, and they can picture you in more senior roles because you are communicating really clearly. And I think that it also will hopefully, as we work on it, it will allow you to express your ideas really clearly, and also have the confidence to actually put your hand up in a meeting and make a point. Or, if you need to go into a presentation, you're not going to be dreading it. You're going to be looking, at some point in time, you'll be looking forward to it because you know that you're going to do a good job and wow everyone.
Yeah.
So there's probably a few different aspects of communication that we could chat about. And I guess the two main ways we'd probably break them up is verbal and non-verbal communication. Let's start with non-verbal because that's quite fun. And I was fortunate enough, I went and presented at a large conference in London a few years ago all about non-verbal communication. And the target was really around young sort of people who are aspiring to be leaders. And I think that there's probably some transferable points out of that presentation and the research I did, because it's really around those people and yourself feeling internally very comfortable and confident with where you are and what you have to say, and that it is important and deserves to be heard. And then it's about conveying that to other people. So when they're watching you present in a meeting, and you might be standing up giving a presentation, or you might just be asking a question in an informal team meeting, they've got that image of you as a comfortable, powerful person. And there's a few aspects of nonverbal communication that we can look at. And I think an interesting comparison to draw is animals. And so you can look at different animals when they're, different hierarchy, like dogs in a pack, for example. You'll have the alpha who's always, standing up very tall, broad chest. They've all got the tail up. And if they're, going to some sort of confrontation, all the hair stands up. So they're making themselves look big and powerful. And the other dogs, and certainly people, are very well aware of that dog's position and certainly what it's trying to put across, which is it's in charge. Monkeys do a similar thing. There's a whole lot of different animal groups where the leader of the pack, is sort of puffing themselves up and they are presenting as a very powerful person within that structure. And the flip side is people who are more subservient or, of a lower power level. You'll often see that, if we come back to an animal example of a dog, they might lie down on it and expose their tummy and put their head down, or they might be having their eyes sort of like looking down at the ground, so they're not challenging. And I think that is very transferable to people. And there's a huge amount of literature on this. We can look at it in our homework, of course. But I think from a person perspective, some of the key things that you want to be looking at, it might be walking into the meeting and how you sit down. That's probably a really important sequence of things. So when you're walking in, you're thinking about, you've got your shoulders back, your chin up, breathing deeply, and you're feeling calm and like you're meant to be there. You're not necessarily juggling 100 folders and drink bottles and being all kind of flustered. So you're just walking in very calmly. And I think it's really important as well. And obviously Sheryl Sandberg touched on this in her book Lean In, which we've been looking at for our homework for this session. It's about taking a seat at the table. And having the confidence to walk into the room, assess the setup and the table, and pick a spot that you feel comfortable in, but also that you are challenging yourself to actually take a seat. So I think a lot of people, when they don't feel confident, or they might feel like they don't deserve to be in the room, they won't even sit at the table. They'll sit at the row of chairs at the back. And that really limits their ability to contribute to the meeting. And it's a really clear signal to everyone else in the room that you don't feel like you belong. But from what I understand of your career to date, and certainly what you're doing now, when you walk into a room, you should be sitting at the table. So I think it's really important that you walk in, you take a seat. I'm a really big fan of like marking your space or giving yourself space. So you're not sort of little and small and taking up minimal space. You're sitting there with your shoulders back and your chin up. You've got your notebook in front of you and your glass of water, for example. And then you're looking around and you're smiling, you're greeting people and you're comfortable. And then I think during the meeting, and this is a pet hate of mine, and I've experienced this with different people who I've had in my teams, how I like to conduct myself in a meeting is very much sitting there, active listening, like we spoke about in our introduction, that's an important skill. Smiling, nodding, taking notes is a really important visual to both the speaker and other participants that you are active, you're interested, and that you're going to take something out of this meeting. And it also helps as well if you know you're going to be asking a question, or if you're going to be presenting later, that you've got clear notes in front of you to do that. And I guess if we're sort of still centering on the non-verbal communication, when it's your turn to speak, you're taking a deep breath, you've got your shoulders back and your chin up, and you're asking your question in a really clear, concise, confident way. And I know we can unpack that in 1,000 different ways about whether you get listened to or not, or if someone tries to talk over the top of you, and we can tackle strategies for that later. But yeah, I think just sitting there with your shoulders back and chin up and being calm is really important. And I think a really good strategy that I've learned for how you can prepare yourself to go into a meeting and have that kind of really good positive body language is called the power pose. So have you heard of that?
No, I've never heard of that.
Oh my gosh. So this was one of the best things I did in that presentation at that youth leadership conference. And there's some fantastic TED Talks on it. And so we can share them in the links of our show. But effectively, somebody has done a whole lot of research about the idea of power pose. And the power pose is like Wonder Woman. So you're basically standing up, and you can do it sitting down too, shoulders back and your hands in fists and on your hips. And you've got your chest out and your shoulders back and your chin up. And what's fascinating is if you can hold this pose for around 2 minutes, the chemistry in your body will actually change. So all of the studies show that the body chemistry you'll see a release of testosterone, which is typically associated with confidence, can be aggression, but generally, confidence and power. And that's actually flowing through your body. And this is really helping you get in the right headspace for how you're going to be displaying your powerful body language, as well as obviously really clear communication in whatever the forum is. So if you're feeling nervous before a meeting or a presentation, whatever it is, just take 2 minutes, side of the stage or in the bathrooms, come into your power pose, think about what you're doing, and just let those fantastic chemicals kind of flow around your body and help you be prepared.
No, I definitely can tell a difference. I think when you sort of have your shoulders back like this, it's sort of opening you up a bit more. Whereas I do tend to sort of slouch or even like head over. That's sort of how I sit. But just even thinking like this, it sort of opens you up. I really quite like this actually.
Oh, excellent. I look forward to seeing you do that in the office. So, there's the power pose. And I guess it's also, if you're standing up, what are you doing with your hands? And I think a lot of people who are starting out in presentations, they really like to kind of fidget or have notes in front of them and they don't know what to do. But again, there's a lot of TED Talks and a lot of research on this. So just, standing with your feet shoulder width apart. You can have your hands lightly clasped in front of you, for example. I mean, sometimes if I'm incredibly nervous, I'll often just hold a pen and it just gives something for my hand to hold on to, but I still try to stay still. We'll talk about presentations later, but like you mentioned, not using notes, don't stand behind the lectern, and you can either stand still or you can just move around the stage occasionally just to help people's eyes stay on you and create some interest for them as they're listening to what you're saying. And so, I guess just to summarize that nonverbal communication, it's about being open and tall and being comfortable to take up space because you deserve to be in that meeting, giving that presentation. Whereas, again, on the flip side, if you're kind of hunched over, you've got your arms crossed, which is a clear signal that you don't feel comfortable or you're not engaged. If you're fidgeting, I had a staff member a few years ago and I'd come into a meeting and the way that her nerves showed themselves is fidgeting. And so she would be scratch, scratch, scratch. She'd be like doodling on her notepad, clearly not taking notes, just drawing pictures. She'd be like obsessively doing this, checking her watch. She might be fiddling with the label on her drink bottle. So not only to myself as her boss, as well as the participants in the meeting, we knew that she was nervous. It also was clear that she wasn't necessarily paying attention. Because while she was looking down drawing pictures, she wasn't taking notes, she wasn't making eye contact with the presenter or the person speaking in the meeting, and she wasn't active listening, smiling, nodding, or contributing by asking questions or making comments.
Sort of like she was in her own little bubble.
Completely. That's right.
That's like the things that are around her.
That's right, and I think she was very nervous. So we did a lot of work on this whole idea of walking in, assessing the room, taking a seat because you deserve to be there, laying out your notebook, pen, water bottle, or glass of water, and then looking up and active listening for that whole meeting. And even things like, unless, there's a requirement that you need your phone with you because, you're in charge of some sort of crisis management service, having your phone either tucked away or face down. Nothing worse than when you're in a meeting and someone is fiddling with their phone, turning it over, or clearly not engaged because they're looking down, scrolling, rather than being part of the meeting. I think that's a good kind of overview of the non-verbal communication. Is there anything in there that is most interesting to you or that you might go away and try?
No, I definitely think the fact of sitting at the table, like you do deserve to have the seat that you're sitting at. If you're invited to a meeting, you do go. Unless if you're told otherwise that maybe you should sit in the corner to take notes. If you're a part of the meeting, be present and be more of a participating member. So I think for me especially is that when I go into these meetings sometimes and there's other people around me that I suppose I haven't really conversed with much, or they're a bit higher up, I do get a little bit nervous, but I think it's more on being the physical representation and sort of faking till you're making. So as long as I appear to be confident, then I will start being confident, if that sort of makes sense.
That's so true.
So I definitely think sort of the posture in where you sit, that was extremely interesting to me, because even just doing that for a couple of minutes before, I could already sort of feel myself being more open rather than sort of being more closed off. So I think that is all very incredibly interesting.
Excellent, great. Okay, well, why don't we move on to verbal communication then? And when you were explaining some of the goals you had for the program in an earlier episode, we talked about tone of voice. So why don't we start there? And I think you already do a fantastic job with how you talk. And I think some of the key hallmarks of a professional communicator are a slightly lower tone of voice, not having a increase or a lilt at the end of your sentence to make it sound like your statement is actually a question, because that can make you sound quite unsure.
And I have heard that is an extremely Australian thing,
yes,
to have the sort of upwards tone like a question, whereas Americans, they sort of go down in tone and have this sort of dominance. So I can't do any accents, and I probably can't do it on command, but it sort of makes sense because you assume American is the direct, opinionated person. But even Australians, like I guess I've never even really thought or heard of that with the slight indentation at the end of a sentence. But I suppose it is something to sort of look at and be more aware of, because as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh wow, I actually do this quite often, and how can I sort of counteract that?
Yeah, definitely. So the tone of voice, I think it's also about when you're speaking the speed. So not too fast, not too slow, so people can hear the message. I mean, I I often speak quite fast and I'm quite excited about, I'm passionate about what I do. So I can kind of get a little bit too fast and a little bit too excitable, I guess. So trying to find a nice balance because, people want someone that is passionate about the topic they're talking about, but you've got to be easy to understand. Otherwise, people will switch off. So we've got the tone of voice you're using, the speed. I think how you modulate your voice is important too. So if you speak in a monotone and there's no up or down in a sentence, people will switch off and it's hard for them to pay attention to you. Whereas if you can actually try to have some highs and then some lows as you go through what you're saying, it kind of keeps people's attention on you a little bit better. And I think also you can be more persuasive. And again, there's some fantastic TED Talks. I listened to one the other day of this fellow, and he really didn't say anything for his 10-minute TED Talk. But what he did do was he showed the tactics around his voice modulation, around when he sped up because it was an exciting point, to when he was, closing, making his final argument. And even though all he was doing was talking about his voice and what he was doing with it, it was as if you'd listened to a really strong TED Talk that had these highs and lows and these amazing, insightful points. And there was some laughter and the person got serious. And it was a really interesting explanation of how important your voice is to how you actually tell your story and how people receive that.
If not more important than the content you're actually speaking because of how people perceive them.
Yeah, that's right, 100%. So I guess, you've got the verbal and the non-verbal communication. And if you're able to think about that, and you can also pre-plan it. So there might be some meetings where you are doing a presentation and so you have to be very mindful of it. There might be others where it's just a meeting and you're really there to listen, but you want to have one powerful question. Then, as you're thinking about that and you're preparing to speak, that's when I think you can be mindful of that verbal and non-verbal and really leverage that opportunity to speak in front of your peers or your management team, for example, to come across as a very confident professional woman. And again, that will help get your point across and also help them see you for your potential and where you're going to go in the future.
Yeah, there's some very interesting points there.
Excellent. So what are you going to do to implement this in the next couple of weeks?
So speaking more on a tone of voice and an actual verbal communication, I think just even understanding and being more aware with what I'm saying when I'm saying it. So not just blurting something out where I do get quite excited and I may speak extremely quickly, because I think that's something I need to focus on, is speaking slower, but also not speaking too slow where I get monotone. So sort of finding the middle ground. So I think I may give myself homework. I'm not sure anyone who'd actually like to give themselves homework, but definitely interested in listening to the TED Talk that you spoke about with how I can use my pitch and my modulation to be able to speak in a conversation, and also ensuring that I'm active listening and I can put in a few key points or even questions to add to the conversation in order to sort of have my space and be a contributor to the meetings that I'm in, so people will actually sort of think of me as a person that, yes, she has some great ideas, or she's definitely understanding what we're talking about, rather than if I were to just be sitting in the corner and not saying anything. So having a seat at the table, speaking with confidence, and being able to present myself in a way that I am comfortable in myself and I can show people around me that I'm also comfortable.
I love it. I think that's so good. I would add, I guess, just one thing, not purely about communication, but you were talking about, having really quality inputs into meetings, for example. And I think something that's really important is the preparation. So it's not just thinking about how you're communicating, but it's what you're communicating. So I think a really good tip is, for example, if you're going into a networking event, a meeting, whatever it is, be researching the topic. So, what is the presenter going to be covering off? What's happening in the world today? If it's an organizational, like just a normal day-to-day meeting, is there any background or context? Are there any interesting statistics you can find? Or what have competing companies done in this area? And then you're really honing that question or that comment down to be really interesting, insightful, and like you said, it's setting yourself up with a reputation as someone who is, they're there, you're listening, and you've got good insights to share. I think the worst thing is, you get a bit excited and you just blurt something out, and it might be out of context, or potentially, it might be a bit too controversial for the meeting you're in. So definitely doing your homework and coming prepared is really important. And even in like a day-to-day meeting. So for example, I have a stand-up meeting twice a week with my peers. And something that I always do is, for my update, I always write my points down. I don't read those points off, but I know that there are 5 key things I wanted to share because that was relevant to the group I'm talking to. And I think that's good because it's very efficient, because you say your key points and then you're done, and the next person can then speak. And it also shows your professionalism because you have prepared. Nothing worse than, especially for this sort of regular meeting, that you know it's coming, you know what you need to say, but someone is there going, oh, what's going on? Oh, I'm not sure. Oh, I wanted to talk about this and then that. And they just sort of babble on. And
it doesn't make them look like they're prepared at all.
It
just
doesn't.
Like, oh, they've just rocked up and haven't thought about anything, or haven't really done anything, I suppose.
Yes,
So,
100%. And you also risk forgetting what the key point is you're trying to make.
Yeah.
And I think in the next episode, like for our next mentoring session, we can talk a bit more about the second half of that communication goal that you set for yourself. And that's around, how do you talk without notes? So, you know, there's the preparation piece. And sometimes, like on a Teams meeting, you can have them in front of you and no one can see. Other times when you're standing up in front of the group, you can't have that. So how do we actually memorize those key points and deliver a compelling presentation? So yeah, I'll look forward to chatting to you about that in the next session.
And I'm extremely excited to sort of look into this a bit more, be able to implement some of the things that we've discussed today, and then report back to you in our next episode on how I actually go with carrying those out.
Fantastic. Well, it was great to chat, April.
Yes, always a pleasure, Maddie.